Welcome to the Sip Revolution podcast, your ultimate destination for navigating the world of alcohol without surrendering the sips you enjoy. I'm your host, Salome, and I'm passionate about helping you reclaim control over your drinking. In this podcast, we're on a mission to equip you with practical, science-backed strategies that will help you transform your relationship with alcohol on your own terms. We will also uncover how society and the film industry often normalize and romanticize alcohol and the profound impact this has on our physiology and psychology. And we'll dig into the nitty-gritty of how alcohol affects your brain, both physically and mentally. So whether you're trying to cut back, moderate your intake, or simply gain a better understanding of your drinking habits, the Sip Revolution podcast is your partner in crime on this life-changing journey. So let's start this adventure together. Grab your favorite drink, or not, settle in, and let's sip our way to a healthier and wiser relationship with alcohol. Cheers to a new perspective on sipping. Hello, welcome to today's episode. Did you know that on average, only 10% of people with alcohol problems reach out for help? It is an insanely small number of people, and it is quite unique. There is no other disease for which so few people don't seek treatment. So why is that? I personally believe that it is down to one word: alcoholic. Such a negative word. Let's talk about this word for a minute. This word that everybody knows and uses, but that has an extremely negative connotation. For many, the word alcoholic is linked to AA and the famous introduction line, "Hi, I'm Patrick and I am an alcoholic." When we hear this word, we often think about a group of sad people gathered in a circle in a dark church basement. By the way, I am not insinuating that AA is negative or that people attending AA are all sad and struggling. I think AA is great for some people, and if it helps you, it is the only thing that matters. Unfortunately, AA and alcoholics still have a negative stigma, and nobody wants to be associated with something negative. People will try as hard and as long as they can to keep themselves far away from the alcoholic stigma. They will say stuff like, "Oh, I'm not an alcoholic, I just like to drink," or "I just overdo it sometimes, but I'm not an alcoholic." This heavy stigma can help us understand why a lot of people don't reach out to get better, because they don't want to be called alcoholic in the first place, and I completely understand. So, let's discuss how to qualify alcohol use disorder, which is, according to me, a much better word than alcoholic. The first thing to understand is that it can look very different from one person to another. It could be the fact of using alcohol to self-medicate an anxiety disorder. It could be drinking a little bit every day, or binge drinking once in a while. The next step is alcohol addiction, which can be physical or, let's say, psychological. I don't think this term perfectly reflects reality, but I'm going to explain. I am calling physical addiction the fact of having withdrawal symptoms when you stop drinking. People who are physically dependent on alcohol cannot safely quit cold turkey. On the other hand, you could not be physically dependent, but still be psychologically addicted. This is when you can stop if you have to, but it will be actually impossible to resist. This is because some strong pathways have been created in the brain, and getting a drink is not a conscious choice anymore. If someone in this situation stops drinking, they will experience obsessive thoughts and increasingly strong cravings until it is impossible to resist and they relapse. I don't think there is a specific number that you can put on alcohol use disorder or alcohol addiction. We can't say, if you have 2 drinks a day, you're fine, but if you have 3 drinks a day, you're not. Or if you only have 1 alcohol-free day a week, you've got a problem, but if you have at least 2, you're clear. Or we can't say either, if you start after 6 p.m., you're normal, but if you drink before, then you're an addict. It just doesn't work like that. I went through my fair share of online questionnaires to try and confirm if I had an alcohol problem, but I never found them very useful. So I thought about what would be some useful questions that you can start exploring to make sense of your own situation. Question 1. Do you give yourself drinking limits and often find you can't respect them? Usually, people who don't have a problem with alcohol don't need to give themselves limits. They just have one drink, and then if they feel like it, they have a second one, and then they stop when they had enough. So if you give yourself a limit like, I'll only have 2 tonight, or I'll stop after 9 p.m., it already means that your rational brain is trying to control the irrational side. Then if, on top of that, you can't respect these limits, and you find that once you've started drinking, you say things like, oh, it doesn't matter after all, just one won't make a difference, then it is another clue that the irrational part of your brain is getting their own way. This could be a sign that once you start drinking, the pathway of addiction is brightened up in your brain, and whatever the rule was, it is in the shadow of the giant more alcohol means more reward sign, and it just doesn't matter anymore. Question 2. Do you feel guilty when you drink? If you find that in the morning, you often have thoughts like, why did I do that yesterday? Or, I didn't want to drink, why did I drink? Or, I wish I didn't. And you find that this pattern is quite frequent, then it might be a sign that subconsciously, you know that drinking doesn't do you any good, and you try to raise a flag. Question 3. Do you feel tired or have low energy? I won't teach you anything if I tell you that the sleep you get after you had just 1 glass of alcohol is really bad quality. You are much better off with 5 hours of sober sleep than 10 hours of alcohol-induced sleep. So if you drink often, it can really pile up. On top of that, your sleeping patterns are disturbed at a higher level, which means that even on nights when you don't drink, your sleep quality is impacted. If you rarely have a restful night, you feel tired during the day, everything feels like a big effort, and you might have low motivation to do stuff because it's gonna cost you too much energy. Question 4. Do you tend to drink faster than your friends? So let's say you are at the pub with friends or at dinner with family. Are you often the first one to finish your drink? Do you sometimes see the others not even halfway through their beer and think, how can they be so slow at drinking? This was a big one for me. I would try to pace myself, but even when I was trying to slow down, I would end up finishing my drink before anyone else. Question 5. Do you worry that there will not be enough alcohol when you go out? Maybe you pre-drink before the event, just in case there isn't enough? Or maybe you bring 2 different bottles with you with an excuse like, oh, I didn't know what people would prefer, so I brought both. Question 6. Do you always have a good reason to drink? If you tend to have an alcohol problem, your subconscious brain will find excuses for you to drink and will convince you that it's okay to drink. It could be that any emotion is a good reason to drink. For instance, if you're sad, you need a little pick-me-up. If you're happy, you need to celebrate. If you're anxious, you need to calm down with a drink. I actually saw something on Instagram the other day, a girl saying something like, I told myself I would only drink on special occasions. It's crazy how Tuesday at home becomes a special occasion. So if any of this sounds familiar, just observe without judgment and take a note of it. Last little comment. If you decided to answer this question seriously, this is your first clue that, at least subconsciously, you are disturbed by your alcohol consumption. Someone who doesn't have an alcohol problem and doesn't care about it won't even consider answering the questions. They won't try to confirm if yes or no they have an alcohol problem because they won't even think about it in the first place. I also just wanted to clarify. It's not because you answered yes to one of these questions that you are an alcoholic and that you need to panic. If you have a few yeses, you might want to assess how alcohol is impacting your life. Maybe you find that you are often hangover and you're tired of it. Or maybe you say or do things that you regret when you drink, or you find you're not very productive at work and you're not happy about that. Or maybe you spend too much money on alcohol and you would like to cut down on the cost. I don't think it is a black or white kind of situation. Alcoholic, yes or no. I like to talk about alcohol problems. You could have no problem at all, or a tiny issue, or several big troubles. So, what if you want to get better? The options out there are very limited. If you take the first step and admit that you have an alcohol problem, the only way forward is quite scary. Stop drinking, potentially go through extremely dangerous withdrawal symptoms, and then abstain from drinking for the rest of your life while fighting cravings and obsessive thoughts. And finally, even if you go through all of these steps, you still have more than 90% risk to relapse, drink again, and be back to square one. So I personally fully understand why so few people reach out for help when they realize they might not be fully in control of their drinking and that it impacts their life negatively. So, this situation is quite messed up, and I think there are two main things that we need to address to help more people in the future. The first thing is to stop using the word alcoholic and to give a better definition and understanding of what alcohol use disorder is and what it can look like. The second thing is to show people that lifelong forced sobriety is not the only possibility. Some treatments exist with much better success rates. One of them, which is what I personally used to go from 2 bottles of wine a day to effortless moderation, is the Sinclair Method. It has been around for decades, and it is a way to safely, gradually reduce your drinking and your cravings, and to bring your brain back to a state where it doesn't care about alcohol. So to wrap up, what I wanted to show you today is that stigma and stereotypes can be dangerous and prevent literally thousands of people from seeking help for their alcohol problem. I hope you found this helpful and that you learned something today. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to learn more about my story and the science behind moderate drinking, download your free handbook in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, leave me a rating or a review. It helps us reach even more listeners and transform lives. I'll see you next time on the Sleep Revolution podcast.